Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
Werewolf the Podcast, episode 170. If you like this, rate it. If you don't like it, well, I suppose you can rate it as well if you want, but it's not very nice of you because that'd be... Anyway, if you go down to the description, you can join us on like Facebook groups or X or TikTok or Twitter or Instagram. There's also some other authors down there and people who write books and they're dead good. Otherwise, I wouldn't have them down there. And other than that, I'm enjoying this werewolf medieval times, so let's go back and join William Marshal as he is going to fight for what he's due from the court of the Count Perigord. Sorry, I can't do the French accent as well as... Yeah, anyway. Love you. Let me tell you a tale of young William, the finest knight in all Christendom, a killer of dragons and a killer of men, and more lucky for him, the Lord Percy's good friend.
Shut up, Percy. Well, really, William, I sing your praises, and what do I get? You get the opportunity to shut up, Percy, before I ram my hand down your... said Chevet. Sorry, Chevet. It is my start to this story. I am William Marshal. I am not the greatest of technicians in the art of swordsmanship, I will freely admit this. I tend to bludgeon my opponents to win. Artistry tends not to be necessary when you are armored. That plated and mailed protection is part of the combat, being able to take blows and turn sharp edges without consideration. A forearm covered in mail or steel can easily turn a directed blow, so I use that hard skin in the fight. Conversely, the same forearm covered in wool or bear cannot be used for the same task. This is why I am good in the battle or the tournament. Dueling is something different, something I never practice. The skill level and tactics change vastly when the body has no protection. It is a different combat sport if you consider killing another man to be sport. I was born for battle, not the effete dueling of the court. To fight to first blood is an anathema to one such as I. Pah! What ridiculous rules they have to this combat made for women and the weak of sword hand. To be honest, a sword against armor is nothing more than a thin-edged hammer. It causes concussive injuries more than a cut. The tip can be used to stab, so it can, but finding gaps in modern armor is difficult, especially when that armor is moving against you. So remember this, and do not judge me too harshly in this fight. Having said that, being a monster of a man really does help in all situations. As you know, additionally, I am a werewolf, and as such, a monster. I can take injuries that would kill a mortal man, and after receiving them, recover in mere hours to full health. I can also impress my power on strikes that a human cannot comprehend. I can use my wolf soul's senses to get a mental picture of a situation no human could ever see. I gain help from my Fenrir, and finally, if it is necessary, I can become the wolf or the wolf man. I don't allow that to happen in front of people, though. Down that line enters madness. Being the beast has to be limited. I enjoy it too much. I enjoy the way I feel and the power I have. I have to be unseen and careful because my form and abilities do not seem godly. They may question my devoutness, and I cannot allow that. I am for God first, you see. to be questioned for that, as I seem to turn into a demon, must not be allowed. Fenrir Wolfsoul is a secret, and what I can become is known by the 3 people I love most in the world, and nobody else. But back to the violence that I also love. I would lie if I said I was a man of peace. I am capable of peace, but I revel in the fight. My blade roared towards the Yellow Knight's skull with all my force. Bruce Delalay was not only going to be dead. With the power and the speed that being a werewolf brought me, the knight would be cut from head to crotch. Anything that got in the way of this strike would simply be destroyed. This was not a blow he could parry. This was an impact that was an end for the man. His head would shatter. His stunningly made tunic would be bathed in red, as would much of the court with the impact of the arterial spray. This count, who counted on this man, would have one less in his retinue today. The Yellow Knight was a duelist, a student of Montclavier. Montclavier was a renowned swordsman, an expert with 2 swords. His system made him famous for one reason. It won duels. It was taken up by many as his method was almost impossible to beat in this type of combat. In comparison, in the field, using 2 blades was a quick way to die. But against a man unarmored, there was no better strategy. You may ask how you beat this approach. It was simple. Take away one of his blades. Then he was no longer able to use that method. I had already robbed him of his 2nd sword in our first clash. I had taken the blade through my chest. Seemed like a sensible thing to do at the time. A killing stroke it was to anyone who was not an immortal werewolf. The steel struck there, and I'd removed it myself and cast it aside. To win now would be much easier. As an aside, I would ignore the gentleman's dueling rules to win. I suppose I'd already broken those rules by being killed and simply not dying. But I was not a duelist. I was a fighter. A different thing. I also had learned from my years that sometimes you have to take a blow in order to give yours. He had fallen when I spat in his face. Yes, spat. Not gentlemanly, I agree, but in this duel, an effective tactic. I had followed that spit that blinded him by smashing my head into his nose. Not the finest and most acceptable manner of things again. And again, I agree with you. These types of things are against the so-called gentleman's agreement that duelists employ. But in my eyes, I would make this a brawl. And in that case, anything goes. To spit and to headbutt had been an already winning method against a man not ready for it. They were tricks that would work. Once. Next time, he would be ready for such things. It was bad form, but what was he going to do with the breaking of the so-called statutes of combat? Try and kill me? Having said all this, he actually was very good. Even with my werewolf gifts, I had not noticed that as he'd hit the floor, that he'd reached out with his boot in his empty hand and drawn a poignant dagger while he'd been rolled forward in some unknown manner. My sword had missed him by a hair's breadth before burying itself deeply into the wooden boards of the floor. Due to the ridiculous force of my strike, it had bitten deep and stuck from the power of the blow. Bruce Delalay, in these wasted seconds of me trying to retrieve my blade, had already spun to his feet to my rear and sunk the dagger to its hilt in my lower back, which was very annoying. I, at this point, was still focused on fetching my weapon from the floor. It was another killing blow by the man. Fenrir was mocking me in my head. By God, this man was fast. The pain was extreme, and I gritted my teeth to turn to him. I was now perplexed. One could even say I was becoming annoyed. His arrogance at the win had him already turning to the crowd who were cheering. His arms were raised and he was busy receiving the admiration of his audience for killing me as he posed and spun, making flashy acrobatic moves with his remaining sword. Oh, how I smiled at this. He was in for somewhat of a shock, to be sure. In his dancing time, I suppose it was, I had managed to heave my blade from the floor. I held it in my right hand now, trying to reach the hilt of the knife stuck in my back with my left hand. It was just within reach. It was very awkwardly placed, but I managed to get a grip on it with a grunt of pain. This was not what the cheering audience expected of me. They expected me to die horribly on my knees. So as I pulled the dagger from my lower back, they in unison took an intake of breath. The dancing, prancing knight had still not realized this was happening behind him. In his head, I was, this time, really dead. It was over. He had won. What a fool men like these were. In his place, I would have hacked the body to pieces to ensure it would not rise again. I swore loudly as the poignard came free from my healing flesh. It released a gout of blood that soon stopped as the wound closed almost instantly. The watchers, now silent, moved away like uncomfortable cattle in the shed, and the knight must have looked confused. If only I could have seen his face. I would have liked that.
Ow!
I shouted at him violently.
That, sir, hurts a lot. Will you stop stabbing me?
I asked him facetiously. He turned to me incredibly slowly, his hand still half raised in celebration. I should not be talking or doing anything, really. And he looked at me with a smile that fell as he saw me standing before him, annoyed, and holding his dagger. A dagger that was now not stuck in my body. I should be dead.
Sir, will you stop stabbing me? It hurts.
I met his eyes and grinned before taking interest in the blade that I now held. It was a thing of beauty. Its heft was nice in my closed fist, and its balance was superb. The weaponsmith's work had been done well, and it was, like the knight himself, finely made with many precious stones wrought into the filigree and gold. I looked at the man as if in a quizzical study of him.
Nice,
I said, taking his eyes to the blade in my hand. I then tucked it in my belt. It would be a good souvenir of his death when he was, dead. I dusted myself down, straightening my shirt, which was ripped and a very bloody mess, and I leant once more on my sword as if it were a cane in a relaxed refrain.
Right. Before we go on, please tell me about any other weapons you have secreted on your person. I would welcome that information, I would. This is my last shirt, and I would like it to be less damaged. These holes and stains will mean I have to replace it at some point. Any more knives or blades on you, sir?
Bruce Delalay looked confused. Genuinely confused. He had won this duel twice. He had killed me twice. He had killed me twice. Yet, here I was, about to continue with the fight. As he dealt with his confusion, I rubbed where the knife had been lodged, maintaining eye contact with him.
That was a well-placed blade, sir. It still stings a little now, so it does.
I told him. I felt a little sorry for him as he looked more than a little forlorn. He had won, had he not? No, he had not. Fenrir was laughing in my head at the man's face. Gervais and Percy were laying bets with other members of the court. Oh, no, I could not see them doing it, but I knew them well enough to know that they would be doing so. On the other hand, Wally stood in rapt attention at the fight, as was much of the rest of the room. The confident Count himself was now not quite so confident. He was perturbed and disturbed. He wisely had called his men-at-arms to him, and they held positions around him and his daughter. He was wise, because once this wet work was done, it would be him I would wish to consider. I took my interest back to the Yellow Knight before me. He was first on the list of irritating problems.
Now you see why First Blood does not suit me,
I told him, grinning before continuing.
I can do an awful lot of bleeding in a fight, as you might have seen. And so, the only game that I play is a game of death. So, on guard, or whatever bollocks you so-called gentlemanly gentlemen say,
I said and waved him on dismissively.
But you should be dead. You should be dead. Twice.
He told me. I nodded.
And yet I am not,
I replied, being as patronizing as I could.
I am very much alive. You have killed my favorite shirt, but it will take much more than that to kill me. I'm a little bit odd in that way, actually,
I said.
No matter.
He tried to say it bravely, but failed slightly in his tone.
I will just have to make your head shorter,
he said, addressing me but making sure the audience could hear. He then raised his sword and took up some kind of a stance.
I know of no man that can live without a head, and yours will be rolling on the floor before this fight is done, sir.
He spat the word sir at me.
Your neck will be a bloody fountain. You will watch the word rise to meet your eyes as you are foreshortened. My blade is so sharp, you will not feel its cut. And you, sir, will die looking at my boots,
he shouted.
Well, we'll see about that, won't we?
I replied, stifling a yawn.
But it gets late, and I need a drink and a strong word with your lord before bedtime. So can we get on with this, please? I would appreciate your surrender or death equally, to be honest. And although I think if you surrendered, I would probably kill you anyway, just because I don't like the idea of you being alive in my world. One way or the other, come on, have at you. Let's just get this done, shall we?
In timely response, the man now sunk his weight into a very precise stance of sorts. His body was bladed sideways so that his left side faced me, and so that he did not give me a large area to strike at. He flipped his sword in a wonderfully acrobatic manner and caught it in his right hand before raising it behind his head in some sort of posy pose. Percy applauded the man.
Bravo, bravo! Gosh, my money is on you, Bruce. Take him,
he announced to the court, giving everyone a thumbs up and nodding at those who met his eyes. I was one of those who met Percy's eye. He gave me a wink and shrugged his shoulders. I laughed in response, looking at the ground. He was a true friend, was Percy. As I watched, the Yellow Knight pirouetted and brought his sword through a complicated set of arcs at my neck. It was a beautifully orchestrated move that should have ended with my body being separated from my head in a glorious sweep. Response, I lifted the tip of my own blade and took his flashing sword on its edge. The clash of steel was loud and shocking in the hall. As he tried to turn the trajectory of the blade, I moved forward and kicked him hard in the fork of his legs. It had been an exquisite impact on his dragon's jewels. It was a superb shot, if a little dirty. The power that I'd transferred into his body from my own upward volley made him physically leave the ground in a very unacrobatic manner. No man can take a kick like that in the balls and look good in receiving it. At the zenith of his upward journey, he gurgled a groan of confused agony. Oh, it was beautiful to hear. There seemed a moment of pause at the top of the arc as his body traveled. He then came back down to earth, where he collapsed to his knees, dropping his sword and grasping his injured vitals in both hands. Oh, how I laughed as every man of age winced in the room. We all partly felt that strike. We all remembered the agony that was brought with it. I knew his pain and that it was a cheap shot, but I was never a proud man. I was not just a man of any kind. I watched the flapping figure on the floor now with inherent interest. I had to make sure that his injury was real and that he was not pretending to be hurt. I'd been caught recently off guard by a dragon of all things. Never again, I'd promised my God. As I watched, he slowly fell to his hands and knees and started vomiting. This made me feel that he probably was actually quite hurt. If he were acting in this role, he was doing an amazing impression of a bollock injury, to be sure. The crowd surrounding us was stunned, sore, and silent. I strode forward towards the prone figure, carefully making sure that I did not fall for any of his tricks. When sure, I pushed the pain-racked body on the floor with a foot, holding my blade ready. He fell to his side in his own world of misery. It was time for the final stroke from me. I stepped back a few paces as I lined up a good, solid running kick to his head.
Hey, William!
Fenrir disturbed my path of thought. I ignored him as I raised my foot in an aim of the final blow. I would want my shin to contact his jaw and travel upward into his skull. I could probably burst that skull like a boil on a beggar's prick. Oh, how would this be remembered by the lucky voyeurs in this place?
Hey, William, there's something you need to address first before they does that.
He told me. This did annoy me.
But I just need to.
I looked at him and pointed at the crying knight's head on the floor. A number of audible clicks took my attention in the silence away from the man in his fetal position. I knew this sound, and it was not a good sound for an unarmored or an armored knight to hear. Ah. Unbeknownst to myself, during the fight, a number of crossbowmen had been brought into the room. The clicks had been them setting their bows, ready to be fired. I was now surrounded, and would have been a pincushion at the will of the Count, who irksomely smiled at me. His finger was raised. I knew if that finger fell, then so would I, under a flight of quarrels. I swore to myself and waited for them to fly. They did not. Why? Why had he not shot me down where I stood? Why are powerful men always so stupid? Why on earth had he not got his men to just release their quarrels? It would now be over. One thing it was very difficult to deal with, even as a werewolf, was an arrow. If they do not push out in the healing process, they stay stuck and they can be an utter bastard to live with.
I think not, my friend,
said the Count, his smile of victory disgusting me, especially as that smile would be short-lived. What a fool.
Place your sword on the floor,
he ordered.
Then you will kneel and apologize to my court for your behavior here tonight,
he told me.
And then we will choose you and your friends' fates together.
His laugh was appallingly fake, but he seemed to be enjoying himself. The Lord was literally lording it over me. What a lauded fool. Gervais laughed. The whole court turned towards him, as this was such an unexpected and incongruent sound at this moment. He sat laughing into his cup, while everyone else stood. Even Weddy and Percy looked at him with some concern. When he noticed the eyes upon him, he raised his hand in a mock apology for disturbing the court and returned to his drink.
Sorry.
He offered his audience in atonement.
What do you laugh at, you dog?
Shouted the Count. Gervais had managed to get the Count to lose his temper. I appreciated my friend's abilities. Gervais removed his eyes from his cup slowly and stopped his laughter. He looked around himself as though he were checking to see who the Count was speaking to. After a few moments in this feigned, confused state, he pointed his finger at himself and gave a quizzical expression.
Sorry, are you talking to me by any chance?
He asked the Count as he leant forward.
Yes, you dog. Why do you find this situation so amusing?
He raged at Gervais.
Ah, okay. But firstly, your insult is not merited or very nice. I like dogs and think that they are particularly wonderful animals. I lost a beloved hound only recently. There's nothing more loving and loyal to a man than a dog.
Will you shut up, you sorry cur?
Yelled the indignant Count. Gervais raised his hands again in apology before continuing.
Secondly, you've just pissed off the William Marshal. Even more than before, and I cannot wait to see what exquisite work he does on you.
He resumed his laughing and raised a drink to the now confused Count.
I wish you luck, sir.
He saluted. The Count of Périgord. How on earth could this man think that William was in some position of advantage? Look at my owl. Look at my men and lads. I have 50 footmen and over 20 crossbow pointed at this mere man. How? What? How in God's name could this man think that William could do anything under these circumstances? The stupid Montagna must be bluffing. In this case, he must be. Must he not? Although, I did just see William stabbed to death. Twice. And yet he still lives. William also beat the finest duelist in the country, with a headbutt and a kick to the balls. Merde. Oh, and I had not considered that there was this little thing about him killing a dragon. No, he is outmanned. It is impossible for a single man to win here, is it not? I turned back to berate them and Gervais. Hilariously, the giant bear of a man sank beneath the table, nodding his thank you to the audience as he went. He was soon gone and hiding. What a coward! That would not help him, and it was extra amusing to watch Gervais and reach up to the table and feel around for finding his cup and disappearing back beneath the table again. Merde! What a joke this man really was. This was beyond funny, his cowardice. I could not help but laugh at this. It was some sort of joke, was it not? It will be an easy kill. What a thrill to watch. What sport. To watch that so-called brave man become a coward in front of me and my retinue. Perfect. Ridiculous. Strangely, I was the only man of my coat laughing. No, the others were making a noise, but it was not happy or joyful. It was the sound of... what was going on? It was the sound of panic. What was going on away from the craven chicane? What was this? It seemed many of my coat were now struggling to get out of the hole. They rushed and pushed and were in a screaming press to get away from something. But what was going on? Some of my soldiers had joined the rout from the banquet hall. Mon Dieu, the cowards! I was actually jockeyed about and moved. What had happened? It was difficult to fight against the running people, to look at what they ran from. Eventually, I saw a black shadow standing at the center of the floor. Above its head, in both hands, it held the Yellow Knight, Bruce Delalay. The Yellow Knight still living and screaming in its giant... What? Pose? Clawed fingers were slowly crushing his body. They wrecked through his flesh, cutting like knives, slowly, and causing enormous injuries. Flesh fell from bone. Blood poured from body to the floor. But the knight still screamed his protest. By God, it was difficult to watch. How could a man so badly damaged still live? It was impossible. I could look no longer at his treatment in the animal's hands. But I had to look. This thing was a demon from the very pits of hell. It was half wolf, half man, and it was a giant. It was broader than two gnats, and a head and a half taller than anyone around it. A dark shadow with baleful eyes of fire. This was the first time I had seen or heard of anything like it. As I watched in horror, it swung the remains of the man in his left hand, clearing the area in front of it of people in a bloody sweep. It had used the man as a weapon. Once the crowd was struck down, it dashed the gnat's body on the floor twice, leaving a bloody pulp where the man's head had been, before throwing it into the retreating people, taking down a number as they ran. What was this thing? What that? The demon now came towards my table, casting about it with claws. I could not move. I could not stop. Just watching this thing as it approached. A woman was torn to shreds as he moved with a simple swap. It bit into another man and wrenched him from his feet, ripping back and forth into the body. Blood sprayed into the air from the wounds that it had caused. It kept coming. And even though I was on a raised dais overlooking the floor, When I reached the edge of the table, it looked down upon me. I could not help myself. I looked up. The edge of the thing was sighted on me as only a predator could. Its muzzle was coated in blood and gore. I was frozen as it slammed its paws into the table before opening its maw and letting go the loudest sound I had ever heard. A roar of infinite size. I fell to sitting in my seat, looking at the thing. I had dirtied myself in the process. Mon Dieu, the shame. Even in this moment, I felt the shame of it. And now, faced with this beast, what was I going to do?
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.